Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NKR YouTube channel. Today, we have the first interview for our spring 2024 issue with Ms. Queralt Boadella-Prunell, author of The Spaces in Between, The Impact of Remittances on North Korean Mobility and Border Economy. This paper assesses how social and financial remittances have influenced market growth and mobility in North Korea's border areas. So this includes border crossing and expectations of life abroad and family strategies. So before we start the interview, I'd like to ask you to please introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. My name is Queralt Boadella-Prunell. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Central Lancashire in the UK. Um, my thesis deals with remittance sending and transnational activities by North Korean refugees and in North Korea, as well as migration out of North Korea. And I've also published about sustainable development in North Korea, sustainable development goals, and memory politics. And prior to that, my background is in Asian studies from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and I have a master's degree in so international relations and political economy of development from the Barcelona Institute of International Relations, and that'd be me.
That's great. Okay, so we'll jump right into the first question. How do remittances impact the socioeconomic dynamics in North Korea's border region? And what kind of role do you think that they play in influencing mobility and immigration patterns within that area?
Mhm. So, as you mentioned at the beginning, my paper talks about remittances in two different ways. So, first, we look into financial remittances, which is the more traditional way of understanding remittances. So, just money transfers, sending cash. And then we have social remittances, which is a term that was coined by Peggy Levitt, and it refers to anything that is done by a migrant to their families back home that carries social capital. So, that will be ideas, values, information. Um, Culture. So anything that is transferred through communication, media pieces, cultural pieces like books or movies, photos, anything that just carries information in a way, and items as well. So I'm going to try to structure my answer in like focusing on what one does and what the
Mhm.
other one does, and then I'm just going to wrap it up. So for financial remittances, the impact that it has is kind of direct because it's money. So we all understand that in a way. Um, However, I do want to emphasize, as part of my paper and my research, I conducted a survey with almost 400 North Korean refugees who most of them had experience sending money back to North Korea. And one of the questions that I asked them was, when you send money back to your family, do you send enough to cover living expenses or more or less? Because most North Koreans, whenever they're sending money back home, is to cover up for that income loss that they had because they left the country. So 50%, well, a little bit over 50% of them responded that they don't send enough to cover living expenses. So in a way, the impact that it has in the community, let's say, is very minimal. And even for the family, you can argue it's not that big of an impact. So they would not go wealthy overnight just because they got money from the outside one time. Um, so in a way, we can say for the most part, the impact that it has in the family, it would be more financial comfort, but it wouldn't be that big of a change. But then if we look into the other one, so the other 25 and 25% that get enough or more than enough, we can tell if there's a surplus in there that is caused because of remittances. And what they do with the remittances, that surplus, is kind of similar to what other developing countries that have migration strategies have. So we see this in India, the Philippines, or Vietnam, for example, that the receiving households, they use that money for their financial comfort, but not directly. They use it for entrepreneurial activities. So they either pay the staff in their noodle shop, or they use that money to buy noodles for the noodle shop or a can, or they may become micro lenders. So there's something that we see in North Korea. The receiving family now receives $1,000 cash, and they use it to loan it to their neighbors so they can start their own noodle stores, or they can fund migration in their families. So we do see a little bit of family strategy starting in specifically the border areas where people start sending family abroad. And that be for the economy. But then if we move into social remittances, there's two things that I want to mention. First of all, will be items that are sent and information. So everything that is sent, so that is one of the things I well is like how do you use remittances to help your migration? And one of the most common answers was that what they received could be monetized. And in my interviews, I saw that my interviews spoke about how South Korean makeup is very coveted. So sometimes the family in South Korea would send South Korean makeup, and the family in North Korea would sell the makeup. Or one of my interviews spoke about a family who got sent fashion magazines, like South Korean fashion magazines. And what the family would do would be showing that magazine to the people, and they would have a little tailoring businesses. So the woman would come and they would say, "I like this dress," and that would be South Korean fashion, and that's in fashion in North Korea. So they would get more financially comfortable because they were monetizing what they were getting. The other aspect that I want to talk about is the actual social aspect. So that would be the photos that they're sending, the information, the cultural pieces, all these ideas that are transferred to communication. And with that, we just see obviously outside information sipping in and so forth. But because it's not coming from media, specifically it's coming from your family that you trust and you love, it's different in a way. So we have an Instagram effect. We see how this communication is done. You have families sending pictures to their families in North Korea, and they're traveling, they're studying abroad, they're in university. Things that if you're in the northern areas going to university may not be that easy for you. So what you send some message. It romanticizes life abroad. It shows how much opportunity you have as long as you work hard and you have the money. You can do whatever you want. There's this message where, well, in North Korea, even if you have a lot of money, you may not get more chances to do other things. So it sells this idea that emigrating or living in North Korea pays back in a way. So it may create aspirations to live in North Korea. And with the money, you actually may have the ability to live in North Korea. But then again, at the same time, because you have more money, now you may be comfortable. You don't want to face the risks that come with living in North Korea. So you may stay behind. But that would be how it impacts the family would get money to cover for their own financial comfort or living expenses, help a little bit the neighbors, and then you may fantasize about living in North Korea. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so you said with financial remittance, most of the time it's not more than what they would already be making, and maybe sometimes there's a bit of a surplus. So do you think in any way it might like sort of contribute to an economic disparity between the border region or the more centrally controlled regions within North Korea? Like, is there a difference? Have you noticed anything like that?
My research specifically looks into the border areas for
Mm,
a very easy answer is like most data comes from the northern areas.
yeah.
However, I can try to respond to this question because let me think for a second what I was going to say. But um, what we do see in the northern areas is like less centrally controlled areas do enjoy more freedom in North Korea. We do see in these areas, we do see more informal economy, the black markets, border crossing that becomes more frequent. Remittance sending happens there. This is because of two reasons. Obviously, they're not in Pyongyang, it's less controls. The other reason is they're in the border. So it's logistically, it's easier to get things in there. So what happens is that in those areas, it is to a degree easier to get rich,
Mm-hmm.
well, wealthier because of this, because it is easy to get what you want from China to a degree. But at the same time, something that happened, well, that occurred to me while I was conducting my interview. So I interviewed practitioners, North Koreans and academics working in North Korea. And this topic about North Koreans in the border areas getting richer and richer came up. And there were two sides that I do want to mention. First of all, it's like a glass ceiling that occurs. So North Korean authorities in those areas you do enjoy a certain freedom, but you're not absolutely free. And the authorities in North Korea, obviously the North Korean regime pays them so much. And that salary may be capped and it may have been the same for a very long time. Whereas those authorities are like they're witnessing how people in front of them, they're conducting inform informal activities and they are getting wealthier and wealthier. So what happens there is that corruption has been rising and they see a way for them to get profit out of that. So they may ask for favors. For example, for remittance receiving families, they may give them presents or pay bribes, so they're not, pursued or persecuted.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what may happen is that North Korean authorities, they have a glass ceiling. So basically you can get so rich. And once you hit that ceiling, the authorities go after you. And they may either remove all your assets or they may just persecute you and punish you for what you have been doing. So we do have that. We have this corruption in one hand, we have the glass ceiling. And that had me thinking during my interviews about, I asked all my interviewees, I think, is it money or power that rules the northern areas? And 100% of my interviews that got that question answered power, because the authorities still have the power in a sense to remove all your assets if they want to. So that would be my answer when it comes to disparity. It's not that remittances do not make that big of a difference because the authorities still have a say. But something that I did want to mention is an example that it's perhaps an anecdote, but like one of my interviews spoke about one specific family in the northern regions that got so rich that they bought their way to Pyongyang. So they bought the permits, bought everything, they moved to Pyongyang. And what happened was that they were as rich as someone from Pyongyang, but the kids could not go to school with the kids from Pyongyang. They could not go to university because you can have the money, but you don't enjoy the privilege. So
Ah.
that disparity would still be there in a way or other.
Oh, that's really interesting. But like now to our final question, what makes the case for transnationality at the North Korean border so much more different than uh, any other sort of cross-border dynamics that we see anywhere else? Basically, I'm asking you why you picked this topic and why you think it's interesting.
That's a very interesting question. I think when I started researching this, I obviously you pick up on what's interesting about North Korea. You obviously know so much. And I already had an experience back in the days with an internship that I did on NKDV in Seoul. So I knew about the human rights situation. Um, so in a way, I picked up on these human rights violations and so forth, and I constructed my own ideas. But now that after I'm finishing my PhD, after so many years of research, I feel the question is very different. So my answer at this case was very different than the one I would have given you six
Few
years
more years
ago.
back, yeah.
Um, yeah. So my answer right now about what makes North Korea so exceptional, I would say nothing. I feel North Korea is unique as much as Spain and France are unique, right? If you compare Spain and France, I'm pretty sure they're similar with everything because Europe, neighboring countries, Catholic countries. But then if you look into everything, you will see that each country has this little thing that may be very different. And when you look at the world and you see, authoritarian countries, democracies, it's like each country has different ingredients for certain things, and North Korea has their own cocktail for challenges and restrictions that North Koreans in the country have to face when they migrate, when they do transnational activities. So what we see when we talk about transnationalism, which is conducting anything that goes beyond your state, we can talk about remittance sending, communication, businesses, activism, and those activities lead to certain products or results. So we have transnational businesses, politic impact. What else can we have? Chain migration, family strategies that emerge because of this transnationality, right? So what we see in North Korea is that North Koreans have to face specific challenges. So maybe it's not that easy to call your family. Maybe conducting international businesses sounds a bit like a fantasy, but they still find their ways to make it happen. Something that North Korea research always like emphasizes the resilience and resourcefulness of
Mhm.
North Koreans. So that's something that we see with that because calling may be difficult, but they do it. They conceal their calls. Remittance sending or receiving is difficult, but they found ways to have brokers in North Korea and China to make it happen. They still have informal economy, and they still do everything. So, and we still see immigration, we still see family strategy starting. So all these activities that you would say they're difficult in North Korea, they find ways to make it happen. So even within North Korea challenge cocktail, in that sense, everything still happens. The one thing that perhaps I would say I don't have any data to say this happens would be something that we see with migration, international remittance sending, that be social mobility with families. So we see, for example, Vietnam and the Philippines, we see um, this migrant families. The moment you send a family member outside, the social mobility of the family goes up. So they are better seen in the community because now they have someone abroad, someone's getting educated, someone's sending money back. Um, and, and the I couldn't find any data that would say that this happens in North Korea. And in a way, it would be the other way because family in North Korea has to conceal the fact that the family member is gone. They have to report you as missing or as dead because they don't want the authorities to pick up on that. And even remittance sending has to be concealed to a point. So in a way, we don't see. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but in my data, it doesn't reflect that social mobility for the family is occurring. And the other one would be social mobility for the migrants or the refugee themselves. So
Mhm.
something that we see in Eastern Europe, like Moldova and Romania, is that the migrant goes to Spain or to another country. They make money, they send it back to the family, but it's not only intended to the family, it's intended for the family and the community. So the family gets the bigger part, but then the surplus will be used to help renovate the school
Mhm.
or help something in the community. So when the migrant goes back, either for holidays or for return migration, um, their social mobility went from 0 to 100 because of how much impact they had in the community. If we look into the North Korea case, um, going back for holidays is a bit tricky for the North Korean refugees.
Yeah.
And what we know about redefectors, so redefectors is a term that is used for North Korean refugees that have gone back, that they decide to go back to North Korea. What we know from them is comes from North Korean media. So we have seen them mostly shamed in TV or having to apologize for what they've done and talk about what they went through when they were living in South Korea. So what we have seen is their social mobility has gone down from, but again, that's from North Korean media. So take it with a pinch of salt. We don't really know what's going on um, for them at the moment. We don't have actual personal accounts. So I would say for those two things, the social mobility of the individual and the family, I don't have the data to say that
Mhm.
we see the same patterns in other countries, but that would be my answer. That would be the exceptionality that I
Oh,
don't see.
yeah. Oh, well, that's a great answer. And that's all for today. So thank you for your time and
Thank
thank you for
you.
your answers. Also, thank you to our viewers for watching. Goodbye.